If you're new to inking, I'm going to show you the basic techniques you need to get started, and we're going to learn them on this old Sakura drawing I made 6 years ago. I'll show you the pens I use and how to control thick and thin lines, where I added heavier blacks, and some simple hatching and shading techniques. But there's one problem. I'm inking directly over my original pencil drawing. No tracing, no backup copy, and no starting over if I mess up. So by the end of this video, hopefully you'll know a little more about inking, and hopefully I'll still have a Sakura drawing. So before I started inking this 6-year-old drawing, I needed to refresh some of those faded pencil lines so I'd know exactly where I wanted the ink to go. Any lines that I wasn't 100% sure where I would put the inked lines got a do-over in pencil first. Looking back now though, I really wish I'd been a little more patient and made a few copies of the original sketch to practice the inks on. That's what I normally do. I'll make copies of my original sketches and then ink or color the copies. But this time I didn't, and what's done is done. There's no going back now. Do you have a bunch of sketchbooks full of drawings that are just sitting on your shelves? Maybe you can learn a new skill with them, inking or coloring, even redrawing them with your present day skills. You know, art is a funny thing when you think about it. We spend hours and hours making our art. But how much time do we actually spend looking at it? A few seconds or a few minutes maybe? I doubt if there are as many pictures that we spend hours and hours looking at. There are a few that I've done that I actually have spent hours looking at when I think about it. In particular, a 6-foot by 4-foot painting of Led Zeppelin with fluorescent paint that I did as a teenager. I would put some Led Zeppelin music on, turn on the black light, and just imagine I was at an actual Led Zeppelin concert. Maybe I'll do a video of that painting sometime. Anyway, my point is that by inking or coloring your old sketches, it gives you a reason to reconnect with your art and enjoy them again. I'm quite glad I took the time to strengthen the pencils, especially with things like the zipper and all of the facial features. This really made applying the inks a whole lot easier. Okay, so with the pencils done, let's get on to the inks. When I start inking a project, I like to make a few strokes in a safe area on a drawing, so if I make a mistake or a wobbly line, it's not right in the focus point of the drawing, like the eyes or face. So here I'm testing my brushes and markers in the hair. I even use a basic Sharpie for Sakura's headband to fill in the large black areas. So I have a variety of brush pens that I've used over the years. My favorites for a long time were the Sakura Pigma brush pens. My favorites were the fine point and medium size. But lately, I've been mostly using the Tombow WSBS 150 Black soft brush tip pen. I just call it a Tombow. And while it doesn't say it on the pen, Tombow describes it as a small soft brush capable of extra fine, fine through medium strokes depending on the pressure you use. And I do find it to be very versatile for making fine to medium thick lines. And I also like to use it for fine details such as eyes and lashes. I'm also switching between several different pens as I work. A fine point works well for the smaller facial details and some of the lighter hairlines, while a larger marker makes filling the solid black areas much easier. But something I've been learning is that you don't need to create dramatic thick to thin variation inside every single line. Sometimes the more important decision is simply deciding which lines should be heavier and which lines should be lighter and thinner. For example, I'm deliberately making some of the outside contour lines thicker. That helps separate the silhouette of the character from the smaller details inside it. And this is really the reason I've been doing more traditional inking lately. You can watch tutorials about line weight, pressure, and pen control all day, but eventually your hand has to learn how to do it. Every stroke teaches you something about pen pressure, how hard you're pressing, how quickly you're moving, how the pen reacts when you change direction, etc., etc. And you only really develop that control by putting in the drawing mileage. That's why old drawings like this are so useful. You don't have to create a brand new finished illustration every time you want to practice inking. Grab an old sketch, make a copy if you don't want to risk losing the original, and ink it. You're practicing on an actual drawing instead of spending the whole session making lines on an empty sheet of paper. Now the style of inking I'm doing on this Sakura drawing is actually very simplistic. It's almost like a coloring book style of inking. Most of it is just clean contour lines, with a couple of solid black shaded areas and just a little bit of hatching across the chest and collar. I'm imagining the light source coming from above and slightly in front of Sakura, but I'm not really trying to create any kind of dramatic lighting here. This is mainly just a quick exercise in getting comfortable using a brush pen to create clean lines and getting used to controlling the thickness of those lines. There are a lot of techniques and ways to ink, but I'll give you a list of some of the most important and basic concepts. And remember, basic does mean important. But knowing about these techniques and actually learning how to use them are two different things. You just have to do it. Now I'm moving on to some of the smaller details. And the hand is actually one of my favorite parts of this old drawing. Apparently 2020 Jim remembered where the thumb goes, so I'll give him credit for that. I guess the reason I said that is because I'm always referring to the way 60s and 70s artists drew the thumb angle wrong all the time. One way I like to practice inking is to start with a few basic exercises. I'll practice some straight lines, curved lines, tapered strokes, hatching, and maybe a few textures. But I don't like spending hours filling pages with the same exercises over and over. Once I've practiced a stroke or technique enough to understand how it works, I want to start using it on an actual drawing right away. So I'll take an existing piece of line art and start looking for places where I can apply what I've just practiced. A fold in some clothing might give me a chance to practice a tapered line, but hair might need a completely different stroke. Shadows give me a chance to work with heavier blacks or hatching. And that's really how I prefer to practice inking. I learn the basic technique first, and then I try to put it to work on an actual drawing right away. And for me, that's a lot more interesting than filling page after page with boring exercises. And now comes one of my favorite parts, erasing the pencils. But before you do this, make sure the ink is completely dry, especially around detailed areas like the face. There's nothing quite like spending all that time carefully inking and drawing and then dragging wet ink across the paper with an eraser. That makes you feel sick and heartbroken. Another thing you can do is take a soft putty eraser and squish it up till it's really soft, and then erase around the face very lightly so you don't smear the ink. I'm also holding the paper between my index finger and my thumb as I erase, so I'm not pulling and crinkling the page. And look at the difference as those old pencil lines disappear. Suddenly, we're left with just clean black ink against the paper. So satisfying. This is the point where the drawing really starts to feel finished. And there she is. 6 years after I originally drew her, Sakura finally has a new set of inks. And I'm really glad I went back and gave this old drawing another chance. If you enjoyed watching me bring one of my old sketches back to life, subscribe to Art with Jim. I've got plenty more old drawings waiting for their turn. But Sakura isn't finished yet. Next, I'm breaking out the Copic markers and adding some color. And here's a little preview of how she turned out. Join me there.